So to pick up where I just left off, the adrenal medulla, which is the inner portion of the adrenal gland, is stimulated by the nervous system, specifically by the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, which we just talked about is the efferent pathway dealing with motor output, and it ends up producing two different hormones but have the same effect, which is epinephrine and norepinephrine. And these hormones are responsible for pumping the body up and getting them ready for, throw down and fight or to run away. And what's that going to be? It's going to be increase in heart rate, increase in blood pressure. It's going to break down glycogen and put glucose in the bloodstream so that your cells can use it to produce ATP. It's going to increase your respiration rate so you can get more oxygen around the body. It's helping your body deal with these short-term stressors. When somebody has had, an adrenaline rush, oftentimes they actually feel pretty wiped out or tired afterwards. And if you think about, we have talked about this in class, or we may talk about this in class, that, this sympathetic nervous system was meant to get us pumped up and amped to be able to, we think about prehistoric man, to be able to, hunt for food or travel to stay alive or fight off predators. And the things that happen, which is that increase in blood pressure and increase in blood glucose and stuff like that, we needed that physiologically in order to survive. The stressors that we have now in this day and age are a lot of emotional or mental stressors. And our body has the same reaction with epinephrine and norepinephrine, causing our heart rate to go up, causing our blood pressure to go up, causing our blood glucose level to go up. Our body's not physically doing the things that are needed with that excess glucose and things like that, but our body can't determine if this is, hey, a woolly mammoth is coming to kill me, versus, oh my God, that person didn't like my post and they left me on red, et cetera, et cetera. So the effects on our body are causing a increase in heart rate and increase in blood pressure and, prolonged, high blood glucose is going to probably lead to insulin resistance, which then could lead to type 2 diabetes. So living a stressed out lifestyle and not managing your stress well can have physiological damage to your body. The pancreas. So the pancreas is located in your abdomen, and the pancreas is both an endocrine and an exocrine organ. So it's endocrine because it produces hormones. It produces two major hormones, but it's an exocrine organ because it actually produces something that is secreted via a duct, and those are enzymes. The pancreas is actually the major enzyme producing organ of the body that will help you break down your food. Any type of damage to the pancreas can be really catastrophic. So the two hormones that are antagonists of each other that are produced by the pancreas are insulin and glucagon. Insulin is responsible for making your cells more sensitive to glucose and for your cells being able to pull that glucose out of the bloodstream to use it for ATP production. Glucagon is when your blood glucose level is, insulin is produced when your homeostatic glucose level is high. So like after you eat a meal, you're going to have a surge of insulin. Glucagon, if your blood glucose level goes below homeostasis, it's going to stimulate your liver to break down glycogen. Float back to chapter 2. Glycogen is the storage form of glucose in humans. Glycogen is a polymer of glucose, and that glucagon is going to essentially chop up that glycogen so that we can put glucose in the bloodstream to get back to homeostasis. There are special cells inside of the pancreas called islets of Langerhans cells that are responsible for producing these two types of hormones. The alpha cells produce glucagon, the beta cells produce insulin. Somebody who is a type 1 diabetic, who is an insulin-dependent diabetic, has had something happen to them where the beta cells of their pancreas are actually destroyed. And so they no longer can make insulin on their own. And so that person is going to require either an insulin pump or injections to put that hormone directly in their body. And glucose is something that is very tightly regulated and monitored because glucose is the number one cellular fuel in our body. And if you think of those, 33 trillion cells in your body, they all need glucose. It's a super important thing that needs to be monitored. But insulin and glucagon are antagonists of each other. So here's the stomach, and then the pancreas kind of sits curled around your stomach there. And this green thing is a duct, okay? And that is what enzymes are going to end up being secreted into, to this open duct, which will then go off to the small intestine. But if you see these other little areas of cells here, these little purple things, those are the islets of Langerhans cells that are going to produce the hormones and put them into the bloodstream. And that's showing you right here. So hormones produced, and they go via, diffusion over here into the bloodstream. The pineal gland. So we're going back up to the head. The pineal gland is part of the diencephalon. It's part of the epithalamus. It produces one hormone, and that is melatonin. And melatonin helps us regulate our sleep-wake cycle. Primarily, it is going to be secreted in higher quantities when we want to fall asleep, to help us fall asleep. And what helps stimulate that is darkness. In some animals, it actually affects mating. So in humans, our eyes are picking up light. That decrease in light, getting into darkness, is going to increase our melatonin production, which will help us fall asleep. Now, what are people doing all the time? They have a screen in front of their face. They're looking at their phone, right up close to their face, or a TV screen or a computer screen. That is going to affect melatonin production. Animals, horses particularly, their cycles are photosensitive. So a horse really only goes into a couple heat cycles a year, and it is stimulated by light and melatonin production. A horse's gestation is 11 months, so it's basically a year. And so in the spring and early summer, they tend to go into heat. Why? Because we have an increase of daylight, and that stimulates them to ovulate. Well, what would be the purpose of that? Well, if their gestation is about a year, that baby will then be born in the spring, in the summer, when conditions are favorable, and that offspring has the best chance of survival. So we're seeing the pineal gland, which is part of the epithalamus. So we've got epithalamus, thalamus, hypothalamus down here. The thymus. The thymus is located in your chest area, behind your sternum, and it is responsible for conditioning a type of white blood cells called T cells. You might have heard of killer T cells. So T cells are a type of immune cell or white blood cell that are responsible for literally directly going up to invader in your body, or a cell in your body, like your own cell that's not acting right, and directly can kill them. They are like snipers. And what happens is that all blood cells, as we know, are born in bone marrow in that process called hematopoiesis. But T cells then migrate to the thymus, where they go through what I like to consider a boot camp. They're going through training where they're being conditioned to not attack ourselves or our own bodies, but to have an antigenic response to a foreign invader. What happens, what's it called when we have a response to our own tissues? Well, that's an autoimmune disorder. So when the T cells go to the thymus, their hormone thymosin is responsible for helping these T cells go through that boot camp training, to have them be the prepared killers, if you will, and not react to ourself. And there's the thymus here. The thymus also is really active in childhood and young adulthood, and it starts to atrophy as we age. And let's think about what happens to us as we age. Our likelihood of dealing with infections, cancer, and things like that change as we age, and that could primarily be a result of our thymus starting to wane. All right, so we're going to have two different flavors of gonads. We've got ovaries in females and testes in males. Ovaries are the female gonad. They are paired. They're about the size of a walnut, but they're the shape of an almond. And they produce two main steroid hormones, which are estrogen and progesterone. Now, our gonadotropic hormones, which came from the anterior pituitary, are responsible for stimulating the ovaries to produce estrogen and progesterone, and that does not happen until puberty, okay? Estrogen is responsible for secondary sex characteristics in females, so breast development, hair development, hips widening, and it also can affect menstrual changes, so the buildup of the uterine lining, things like that. Progesterone it's actually considered the pregnancy hormone. It's the highest during pregnancy. It keeps the uterine wall quiet and avoids contractions. And it's the highest in what we'll learn about in chapter 16 is that the menstrual cycle has two different phases. It has the follicular phase and the luteal phase. Estrogen is kind of the dominant hormone in the follicular phase. Progesterone is the dominant hormone in the luteal phase, and there are reasons for that, but they're both sex hormones or steroid hormones. So here are the ovaries. So the ovaries are attached to the uterus via this ovarian ligament, and then this is the oviduct, or you might have heard of it as the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is actually not secured onto the ovary, which again we'll learn more about in chapter 16. The testes are the male gonad, and they are also paired. They are an endocrine gland, and I should say that the gonads are like the pancreas in the fact that they are both endocrine and exocrine. So their endocrine function is to produce hormones, but their exocrine function is to develop gametes, egg and sperm. Testes are the male gonad, and again, they're paired. They're located in the scrotum, which is situated slightly outside of the body, in the scrotal sac, and they produce one major hormone, which is testosterone, and testosterone is needed for secondary sex characteristics of men, as well as sperm production. And again, testosterone production does not occur until puberty, when we get those gonadotropic hormones being produced. So here are the testes out here, sitting in the scrotum, and then this is a close-up of the testes here. These little lobes are called lobules, and they're separated by septa, and these are seminiferous tubules where sperm are produced. If testosterone is not there in adequate production, sperm are not going to be produced. And that is it.